Hi, everybody. This is Amy Schiffman, and I am excited to be here to talk about major gift development, especially during a global pandemic. I'm going to share my screen. So, Constance, you're going to tell me if everybody can see this.
I
We
can
good?
definitely see
Okay.
that. Yes.
Okay, great. So my name is Amy Schiffman again. I am president and CEO at Evolve Giving Group. We are a nonprofit consulting firm, or I should say we're a consulting firm that works with nonprofits all around North America, founded and led by women, which we are very proud of. And we're really focused on capacity building. So we do a lot of work in campaign management, strategic planning, board development, finding talent, and we do a lot of coaching and training, both at the board and the professional level. Ultimately, we're helping our clients to grow, and many of our clients come to us because they're looking to build capacity. They're looking to improve or grow their fundraising programs, which really leads us into what we want to talk about today, which is thinking about major gift development and how things have changed or not, given the global pandemic. So we're being a little ambitious, but I think that's okay in this day and age. I want to talk first and foremost about whether or not your case for support has changed. And then I want to kind of take us back, which might be a review for some of us through the donor life cycle, and thinking about what those stages look like and how it relates to developing your major gift prospecting and your major gift program. I also want to spend a little bit of time talking about cultivation and stewardship. What's the difference between the two, and how can we formalize or make that plan a little bit more sophisticated? And then I'm just going to touch on two additional topics, which is because this is not a solicitation training, but I want to give you a little bit of encouragement about those major gift asks, and think about that board role. So whether it's your board of directors or committee that you work with, I know a board of governors, that we have different names for all the different schools, universities, colleges within the system, but do you have a lay partner or a set of lay partners that you can be strategizing with during this time? So that's a lot to cover, but let's see what we can get through during this hour. First and foremost, I want to just take a step back and think about major gift development as a whole. And really what major gifts is all about is focusing on relationship building rather than transactional fundraising. So relationship based versus transactional fundraising. And so that is all about figuring out, I think, especially where is this different when we're talking about a global pandemic than what normal or typical life used to look like. I think we all spend a lot of time thinking about, like, where do we find these people? Where do we get these new gifts? And what I'd like to encourage you to do today, given the uncertainty of our times, is to go deep, but not wide. So that if we can go deeper with the people who already know us, have already engaged at some level, who already like us, maybe could love us, rather than thinking a lot about donor acquisition. If we look back at what happened in the sort of 08, 09 economic crisis, we find that what we learned from that time is that the organizations, the universities, the colleges that really went deep rather than wide with current donors, even if those people were not giving at their major gift level, the investment in those relationships really paid off in the long term. By 2011, 2012, when things started turning around and people were more willing to make gifts, that investment of time, energy, and stewardship in those donors really paid off. And some of those organizations, schools, universities, colleges, came out raising more money than they went into the economic downturn raising. So I want to talk about how do we do that, especially if some of us are working from home or we're not able to meet with our donors face to face. This is not business as usual. How do we get through this? One of the first things I want for you to be thinking about, maybe you have already, and that's fantastic. And if so, put something in the chat box to tell us about how you've done this, is repositioning the case for support. most of us need to talk about how things have changed. So that case that you were using last fall or even last winter that talks about all the good work that you're doing at your school probably won't work well anymore. And so if you've not taken the time already to rewrite that case for support, now is the time to do that. And if you think, where do I start? Who do I engage? I'm not the communications department. Just be thinking about, because your case for support now builds on that case for operating last year's annual case. It certainly builds on that. I don't think you have to rewrite the script entirely, but you do have to think about what's different now than what was happening then. How has the school shifted, changed? Maybe you're sick of hearing the word pivot, but I have to say it now anyway. How has the school pivoted to respond to the needs of its students, most importantly, and its faculty, families, in the surrounding community? What has happened in order for your team to be able to deliver the education that you've promised to your student body? Lots of things have changed. Technology, safety precautions. I can only imagine that if you speak to the senior administration at your school, they'll give you a whole laundry list of new expenses that the school has had to embrace in order to be able to provide a safe and a different education, including, again, PPE, technology, whatever it is that they've needed to adjust in order to be able to continue delivering on this education to students. That costs money. And there's where the annual campaign comes in. So if we can reflect with donors on what has changed and what that new case for support looks like today, even giving them a sense of how much have you spent in order to be able to pivot, in order to be able to provide education in a radically different way than you have in the past, that's what the case for support has to be about. And then you have to boil that down so that it feels relevant to the donor, so it feels focused on the donor. And by that, I mean, because of your financial support, because of the gifts that you've been giving last year, this year, we've been able to make these changes. Because you want us to keep providing this education, you care about the work we do, this is what we've done. We have to pull the donor into the picture. The donor's not on the outside, the donor's on the inside. And last, I would just say that the case for support has to be about students, has to be about faculty, has to tell the story of real people. And I say here, make it real and make it urgent. We know that the top 86% of the top 3% of households by wealth, of that 3%, 86% of them are giving to meet urgent and critical needs, which means we are motivated by urgency. We are motivated by crisis fundraising. We as fundraisers don't love crisis fundraising. It's stressful, but the donor responds to very clear needs and stories. And you saying, I need this by this date in order to make good on this promise to our students. That feels compelling to donors. We know, for better or worse, that's what the data tells us. So how do we make our stories about what's going on your campus very relevant, very real? Can we get some testimonials from students, from coaches, from faculty members? Can we get photos of the way your students are learning right now? So as much as we can put a real name and a face to what's going on your campus and showing that the students continue to thrive, that's your new story. That's the story that I want you to be telling. So the first thing we need to do in order to be out there talking to our major donors is understand what that case for support looks like. How has the story changed? How has it stayed the same? And have you written that and boiled it down to a few bullets that are digestible, that are tangible for the donor? Constance, before I move on, are there any questions, comments in the chat box that I should be aware of?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. I'll check in with you every once in a while, just to be sure. So that was then, this is now. I mentioned at the beginning this relationship-based fundraising model, which again, this sort of prototypical, like even just this picture gives me, like, traumatic memories of when I was an in-house fundraiser and I had to do these kinds of events every single year. And we were counting on these paddle raises, right? To get people in the door, these auctions, whatever it is you were doing prior. The event-based in-person fundraising events is, for at least the short-term future, is a thing of the past. And so what it's pushed us to do, by the way, maybe we were very nervous about it at first, but what it's pushed us is to go back to the basics, go back to what it means to be a major gift fundraiser, which means that we have to develop relationships with people who care about the work that we do. We have to do that in order to achieve the gift. It pushes us to not rely on transactional fundraising tactics like it. And what I mean when I say transactional is any form of fundraising that does not require a relationship or a conversation between two people to achieve the gift. So what does that mean? It means all the direct mail work or direct response work that you're doing. That's transactional fundraising. Transactional does not equal bad. There is a place in our campaign plan or in our campaign strategy for transactional fundraising. It's just not major gift development. And we don't solicit major gifts via transactional. Typically, we don't solicit that way. Events where I make my gift to a reply card or I have to check a box on anything, whether it's a website or a hard copy invitation you send, that's transactional fundraising. It's a transaction between you and the donor. It's not based on a relationship. So when I talk about relationship-based fundraising, it's how many people are you, is your chancellor, is your dean, is your board, how many people can you get out there and actually talk to about the work that you're doing? That's relationship-based fundraising. And when I say go deep, not wide, I mean finding the people who have already expressed some interest in what you're doing, some level of interest, and deepening that relationship rather than going, this may not be the year, and don't shoot me for saying this, by the way, it may not be the year to collect 100 new alumni donors, because I'd rather you spend, if we have limited time, and most of us are working in very small, lean fundraising shops, if we have very limited time, energy, and resources, including financial, to go out there and achieve these gifts, I'd rather you go deep. Again, I'd rather you go to the current base, people who have shown some interest in your campaign, in your school, than out there looking for anybody who has an alumni tag on their Facebook page. Here's the part that may be review for you, but I think it's an important review. Remember the life cycle of a donor. Here's what typically happens. We identify a prospect, right? This might be an alum. This might be a current family. It might be a family foundation. We identify the prospect, we solicit them, and then we solicit them again. And the mistake we make is we skip the most important parts. Is we don't often do, and by the way, I think colleges and universities often do a much better job of this, the cultivation and the stewardship, than the health sector or the human service sector. So I think you're ahead of us, the rest of some of my clients in some ways, but I still think we all have some work to do on cultivation, the process by which we turn a non-donor into a donor. That is cultivation. And stewardship, the process by which we keep someone giving. We engender donor loyalty. Those are the steps that we're missing. We find the donor, we ask them for money, and then we ask them again. And it's irritating to them. It's irritating because they feel like the only time that they're hearing from us is when we're asking for money. So the point of building a major gifts program is not just to solicit more people for more money. It's to develop a program around cultivation and stewardship so that the ask is easy. The ask for us is uncomfortable and it's hard when we have not built up these programs. The ask is easy when we've stayed in touch with the donor, when members of our board of directors or board of governors are reaching out, our trustees, whatever you call them at your university or college. When those things are happening, when we've got a team of people reaching out to stay in touch with our donors and they hear from us consistently, the ask becomes much easier. It's very uncomfortable for us to solicit, and it's uncomfortable for the solicitee when they haven't heard from us all year. And it, again, feels transactional to them. So how do we get to that point? If we're looking at who are major gift prospects, what are the key qualities of a major gift prospect? You may have seen this before, the ABC of major gift prospect identification is ability, belief, and connection. Ability, belief, and connection. When a prospect has one of those things or two of those things, but not the third, they're not the best prospect. In other words, just because someone is wealthy and they went to your school Just because they're wealthy and went to school, you think, great prospect. Your experience probably tells you what mine has told me, that those two things alone do not result in a gift. It is the belief in the mission that has to be there. They have to feel connected, not just a connection to the school, but a connection within the school and a belief in the mission. They have to believe in what you're doing. They have to understand what your campaign is there to achieve. So A, B, and C have to be true for me in order for someone to make it on my major gift prospect list. Two of those alone are not enough. And sometimes what it takes, if you've got two but not three, is the more time developing that relationship. That's when they're ready to be asked. It doesn't mean they're not a great major gift prospect, but what it means is they're ready to be asked. The top of my list, so I shouldn't have said they don't make them on my list at all, but make it onto my list, but they need work until A, B, and C are true. And what I'm asking you to focus on right now is middle tier giving. So middle tier giving is this middle tier, the people who are already major donors, fantastic. We can talk about the stewardship of those relationships. What I'm hoping you'll do is move people up from here, those who've made a first time gift, those who make a gift but inconsistently, and those who make a consistent gift but not at the major gift level. That is where the time should be spent. I'm going to assume that those who are already major donors and those who are giving L&E, by the way, is legacy and endowment, those who have made those kinds of gifts likely have a high level relationship manager already assigned within the college or university. What I'm worried about is those at these three levels don't, because you don't have a lot of time and energy and people power to commit to those people. So if I were to say, what else can I be doing this year, especially from home, or especially when I cannot meet with people in person, is spending time on those on this list. They've made one gift. They make a nice gift every once in a while. It's not a regular donor. We don't really know a lot about them. We don't have a relationship with them. And someone who makes that consistent, maybe $1,000 gift, but that's not your major gift threshold. Those are the people we want to be spending time on. And that is all about stewardship. In order to understand how to move those people to the major gift level, we have to understand more about what motivates them. So the secret here, which is really no secret at all, is linking the donor's philanthropic goals and interests to the school's needs. Is understanding, remember I said when I was talking about the case for support, we have to understand what moves them, motivates them, not what we need. That's the tricky counterintuitive thing here. It's not about what we need. It is about what they want to achieve with their philanthropy. Most people who have major gift capability, have philanthropic goals. We have to understand what those goals are. The only way to understand what those goals are is to ask them. So we have to get to the point where we're developing a relationship with them. And that may be about asking that person for a Zoom coffee. It may be about, it's a gorgeous day today in the Chicagoland area. You could actually have coffee with someone outside. End of the week, maybe not. But it's about trying to get in front of that person, whether it's a socially distanced in-person backyard meeting or sitting for coffee somewhere outside while the weather holds up, or it's about Zoom. And we know that people are having good success getting Zoom meetings with people that were very hard to get in front of before. Maybe because that person traveled all the time, maybe because they were always in a busy downtown office. I think, that was true at the beginning of the pandemic. And what I'm hearing from my clients is that it's still true now. They're more easily getting Zoom meetings than they would have in-person meetings. And so if you've got that 20 minutes to have coffee with someone, have your list of questions ready. Understand what it is you need to know in order to fill out that donor profile and be able to check the A, B, and C box. I have 8 categories here, or questions here, that I would like you to consider when I'm trying to figure out if this person's ready to be solicited for a major gift. What should we know? Relationships within the college or university, personal interests, volunteer roles, communal giving. What's their family history with the institution? What's their giving history with the institution? All of these, if you can get, I'm not saying you must be able to answer each and every one of these questions, although that would be amazing if you can, but can you get close? Because if you're only at 50%, you probably don't know enough about them to ask them for a major gift increase. And it's not only that. Listen, I'd love for you to ask these questions directly to the donor, but you also may need to ask these questions to people who know the donor. So it's building out that donor profile or that donor file so that by the time you get to the ask, you know exactly what's interesting to this person. And when you know what's interesting to this person or why they've made even a lower level gift, you can really dial up that aspect of the work that you're doing. If this person's really motivated by financial assistance, they want students to go to college no matter what the financial constraints are, well, then you really can zoom in on your scholarship or your tuition assistance program. That's what they want to hear about. How many students? How has that changed during the global pandemic? Right? What do the numbers look like right now? So once we know what they're passionate about, we know what aspect of our case for support to dial up for that person. Keep keep in mind it's about what their interests are, not what we want to achieve. We can't go to this person and say we have a capital campaign that we need to finish, not knowing whether or not they believe in giving to bricks and mortar. That's meaningless. So what is important to them? And then I know you have available to you that information, that opportunity to dial up some aspect of the work that you do and make it a match for that donor. Constance, any questions, comments that I should be aware of?
No, not yet. Just people
Okay.
checking in. Yeah.
Excellent. So, one or two more minutes on major gift prospects. What I want you to do, if you say, well, I don't know how to get to that list, Amy, that you're talking about, of people who are first time committed donor, occasional donors, and committed donors, what I want you to do is take a look at your database. And I know we all can, have a session right now where we complain about the state of our database. Maybe we'll have that offline later. But I'm hoping you can get a report out of your database that allows you to look at some of these factors, some of this data. So we want to be looking at people who've given to us longevity. There's consecutive givers and there's longtime givers. I want you to look at both. I want you to look at people who've been giving you 25 or 50 or 100 or $1,000 for years and years and years, because typically there's more there. I mean, interestingly enough, the average legacy and endowment donor has not been a major donor throughout their lifetime, but they've been a long-time consecutive donor throughout their lifetime. So it might be someone who's been giving you $100 their whole lives and suddenly leaves you $1 million in their will. That's not uncommon. And those people have the financial wherewithal, if stewarded properly, to make a major gift. So I'd like you to take a look at, start noticing trends in your data. Who's been giving to us for a long time, even if it's not consecutive giving, for 20 years over time? And then who's been giving to me consecutively? You know what? This person has not missed an annual campaign gift or a campaign gift in the past 7, 8 years. That is a person I would be interested in learning more about. If you've got the ability to do some wealth screening and go deeper with some of the people on your list, and you can take a look at which of these people have a donor advised fund, that would be another place that I would look to say, oh, this person's sort of taken their giving and their intention about giving to the next level. If they've got a donor advised fund, this is someone that I want to spend a little bit more time getting to know. And then, of course, we want to look at people who've been active in some way. Are they serving on some committee? Have they volunteered for you for an event or a student-based program? Have they attended one of your events? Are they parents? Are they alumni? Or are they alumni families? The engagement piece is huge. So we want to look at both that giving history and giving trends, and also people who've engaged or are active with us in some way. Once we've done that, we take those names from long list A and move them over to shorter list B, so that we can really work on that cultivation or that stewardship plan. And that's the list that I'd maybe want to put in front of my board of trustees or my major gifts committee, whatever lay body works with you, is accessible to you. I know not all of us have access to the board of governors or board of trustees, but if there is a lay committee, even a development committee or a fundraising committee that you can work with, and you can put that list in front of them to see who they know, that is step one. And maybe you're putting that list in front of your dean or your chancellor. We want to get that list in front of other people who might recognize names, and we start making those connections. I also want to put that list through a wealth screening or other sort of research vehicle. And there's lots of them out there. We use iWave for a lot of our research. So I love you to run that list and see what you come up with, because we can take a look at wealth and giving capacity. And that's another way to narrow down that list. Once I've taken that long list A, created that shorter list B, and then researched it and had several eyeballs on it from my professional and lay leadership team, now I'm down to even a shorter list C. And that shorter list C is the list that I'd like you to consider putting together a cultivation, if it's a non-donor, or a stewardship plan. A stewardship plan that is individualized for that person. In order to do that, I want you to assign a relationship manager. That might be someone on the professional team. It might be someone that is a lay leader or a volunteer, and it might be a combination or a partnership of a team that works together. It might be for a very high level prospect. It might be the chancellor and someone on your board. So we've got to assign those teams, and we can't lose sight of them. And this is a very intentional process. This is something that we track very, very closely. I just want to remind those of us who haven't seen this Turnside curve, I like this slide. AFP, Association of Fundraising Professionals, put this out many, many years ago, and I still take a look at it, because what I think is difficult right now when I talk about cultivation plans and stewardship plans, and you're thinking, well, I can't invite people to things in person. I can't meet with them in coffee for person. How do I engage? And I want to talk about that in a second, but I want to remind you that engagement equals higher giving, right? The second that, if we look at giving from low to high, the second we start involving our donors beyond writing us a check or giving us a credit card number, giving goes up. So the more we can engage them, and that means even on Zoom meetings, State of the Unions, whatever it is, the more we can engage them, and certainly hopefully post a vaccine, we'll be able to engage more and more in person. The higher level, they're sort of sweating out. I always give the example of my development chair. I worked in an independent school before I started consulting. When my development chair was sending me, emails and phone calls at 10:30 at night, I knew she was sweating it out with me. I knew I wasn't the only one up at night wondering if we were going to make our numbers. There was this sense of accountability from my board, from my development committee, where they were in it with me, and their own giving went up. So that's the purpose of creating these stewardship plans or these cultivation plans, is to figure out how we get people more engaged and interested, and maintain that donor loyalty. I want to give you a structure and a template to be able to do that. Constance, anything that you want me to remark on?
I don't see anything as of yet, but I'll keep you posted.
Okay, you feel free to interrupt me. I want us to think about stewardship, the process by which we keep donors giving, even if it's a lower level gift, that we have a process for stewarding every gift, and that this is institutionalized. The entire advancement team understands how it is we're going to approach this process. And I have it split here into entry level, middle tier, pre-major, and major and mega gifts. You can totally rewrite this language. You can make this applicable to your team, to your development or your advancement program, and decide what it looks like. I have arrows at the middle tier and pre-major, because this is where I really want you to focus. Again, my assumption is that the major and mega donors are already getting some attention, but what's missing is attention at this 2 and 3 level. So what might this look like for you, for your advancement team? Stewardship segmentation. So for market 1, I'm calling it entry level donors. These numbers are totally replaceable. Like I said, maybe entry level for you is under 5,000, not under 1,000, whatever it is, depending on your campaign. You just insert the numbers and decide what that threshold is. But what is it that happens at that level? Entry level donors. What's non-negotiable that everybody gets? Everyone's getting a thank you note, right? Is it an electronic note? Is it a hard copy? Everyone's getting their gifts acknowledged, hopefully within 72 hours. I just want to say that again. Hopefully within 72 hours. I like for thank you notes to go out within 3 days of having the school having received the gift. It's really important. One of the main things we hear from donors is when weeks go by and they don't get a thank you note, they wonder if you got it and they wonder if you appreciate it. So if there's one small change you can make on your team, it's that for those of you who have, oh, well, our batches go out once a week, that's a little too long to get those thank you notes out. We want really quick, even if it's an automated email. I love for something to go out within 3 days of receiving the gift. It means a lot to our donors. Okay, so what else do they get at that entry level? Maybe they're getting your newsletters, electronic. Maybe they're getting your annual reports. Maybe they're invited to these large scale special events. Whatever it is, this is constant, professional, low cost, high efficiency at this level. Decide what it is and rewrite your own market one plan for stewardship. Okay. Market two is what I'm calling middle tier. For you, middle tier might be much higher than this. Because we're working with some smaller schools, colleges, universities right now, I have some pretty conservative numbers in here. But if your middle tier base is higher than this, again, just fill in the numbers, decide what that looks like. Typically, we start seeing donor recognition around this level, 1,000 plus, 2,500 plus, whatever it might be for you is where you start seeing that acknowledgement, that donor recognition level. I call it silver circle membership just because we see a million silver circles out there. Sometimes that means for an institute, like I think United Way is calling silver circle anyone who's been giving for 25 years or more. So whatever that donor recognition level is for you, that's generally where it starts. So people are getting a little bit more stewardship. They're getting a little bit more attention from your team. Step up programs are these programs that encourage you to go from one level to the next. In other words, like let's say your major gift threshold starts at 1,000 or 2,500. Maybe there's some kind of a program specifically geared toward people who are somewhere between 500 and 1,000 that pushes them up, that allows them to participate in a program that's typically only available for $1,000 plus givers, but we're going to invite you to this one as well in the hopes that you'll step up to that next level. Here's where we start to see leadership development and training programs, where we start to see, and maybe most importantly, the most important characterization of this level is where we start to see one-on-one solicitation rather than in a non-Zoom world, rather than phone calls from some random volunteer or professional that they don't know, or a piece of mail or an email. So here's where we start to see some relationship building happening with regard to how they're solicited. And typically these solicitations at your middle tier level start to get characterized, certainly at your major gift or your pre-major gift, may be characterized by a one-on-one solicitation. Opportunity to serve as a solicitor, which means we might ask people at this level if they'd consider soliciting other alumni, for example, or other families. This starts being more customized, a more visible investment of time from your team. Okay, so that's two. That's where I want you to start thinking about what does your market two look like, and what is your advancement team willing to commit to in terms of the steps or the moves that it will make with these donors. This defines your major gift program. And again, we go from there. You might I'm calling market three pre-major, the 5 to 25,000. Maybe this is major for you. That would be okay. Again, how does it look different than market two for you? I want you to rewrite this list. Market three, market four, again, more recognition circles and events, leadership training, personal and Zoom visits. Maybe at this level, people are assigned a donor officer or a relationship manager. Again, opportunity to serve as a solicitor. Maybe people are asked at this level to begin serving on committees or your board. And maybe they'll be asked to cultivate other relationships. And market four is where we tend to see the most time and attention paid, which makes sense with individualized plans. I'm suggesting that if you have the time and the resources to start creating individualized plans for your pre-major donors, for your 5K to 25K, fantastic. That's where I'd like you to go deeper. Right? How much involvement can and will your board have with this market three? How do we move them into that next segment? It's all about the move. So if we're going to summarize um, the work that we have to do with middle tier planning, how do we get people moved up? Is one, it's about individualized cultivation plans or stewardship plans. How do we write a script? How do we write a plan or a calendar specifically for those people? It means the list has to be pretty long. We're not talking about thousands of people here. So that's where I'm saying you might want to change those numbers in order to pare down the list. If you have too many people to be able to actually write an individualized plan for, if we include $5,000 donors, then maybe it's 10 and up, maybe it's 25 and up for you. But where do we get to the point where we can add a few individualized plans to your major donor list? Meaningful engagement and data. So again, thinking about how can we involve these people? What can we invite them to? Right now, it's mostly online events. It might be online parlor meetings, right? There might be an opportunity for donors at a certain level to watch a class in action because they're online, something they would not be able to do in the past. Can they watch students how they are functioning with professors? Can you do videos of what's happening on campus? Can you take pictures and show them? What stories can we tell? So this meaningful engagement, thinking more creatively than we ever have before about how we allow our donors to get a peek inside of this world was just challenging. Maybe it's a video that talks about all the different people at the university or the college who've had to put their heads together and their resources together to provide an effective remote learning environment. So maybe have those people talk and send that out to the donors. We have to keep thinking about how we engage. We have to get creative. I saw one video where we had a coach talking about what he's doing with his a girls athletic team. That was fantastic, talking about doing what he could do and keeping everybody in shape and keeping their morale up, even though they can't compete right now. It was very motivating. And last is staffing and leadership, that professional and lay partnership around how we put more people on that list because we have relationship managers to assign to them. If we can get our board of directors engaged in that work, we can assign more people relationship managers. And so once we're to the point where we've done a good job stewarding that relationship, where we actually have assigned relationship managers or donor officers to more people on your list, especially that middle tier, and we're able to get our board or committee members involved in developing relationships with our donors and get them out there saying thank you, we're going to be more comfortable, as I mentioned before, getting to the ask. And not only getting to the ask, but I have a lot of clients right now asking me if it's appropriate to be asking for increases given the craziness of this world, given the global pandemic, given where we are with the election and the craziness around that, given where we are with social justice issues and issues of race injustice. Is this an okay time to be asking for an increase? Isn't there a lot going on that's distracting them? Absolutely. There's a lot going on that's distracting them, but it's absolutely okay for you to be asking for an increase right now. And what I say here is your work continues to, your work continues. Your donors want you to continue this work, need you to be continuing to educate these students and making the education affordable. And so we have to ask them to be our partner. You're not asking for a handout. You're asking on a major gift level for a partnership. You're asking them to help you meet these challenges and to work with you to do that. Keep in mind, they have philanthropic goals. If you're asking them for a major gift, you're a good match for these philanthropic goals. And so this has to be a partnership, and you're asking for that investment in a partnership. We have to approach the ask in a different way. And when we approach it that way, we feel more comfortable and they feel more comfortable. So yes, get out there and ask for that increase. It is totally appropriate. Obviously, you have to do that sensitively. If all your research on this donor points to the fact that this was someone who owns a chain of restaurants, for example, and the restaurants are not opening or not doing well right now, it's not a sensitive thing to be asking that person for an increase. It might not even be a sensitive thing to ask that person for a flat gift this year. But if what your research tells you is this is someone who's doing well, and there are a lot of people who are still doing well, if this feels like someone who, based on your conversations with the donor and conversations with people who know them, that this is someone who can still make a meaningful gift, then our job is to get out there and ask on behalf of the students, and to not do it in a way that's apologetic. The minute you put yourself in this back seat, the minute we're in the rear view mirror for this donor, because we've allowed them to prioritize what we assume is, the frontline workers, health charities, feeding people, things that we assume might be more important to them, and we're in the rear view mirror, it's hard to get back out in front of them. So I would not lose your place in line. I would not. That's for the donor to decide what their priorities are, not for us to assume. Keep that in mind. So asking for help and asking for the increase is what needs to be done right now, because I would bet that your budget is not lower than last year. I would bet that your budget is higher than last year and that we need to raise more money. And I think they'll understand that if we talk about that case for support. As much as possible, I would like to listen. We may not be sitting across from each other, face to face in a small room, but even if it is Zoom to Zoom, I would like you to make it a priority to not be doing these major gift solicitations on the phone, even though it's easy to do that, and the solicitee might be pushing you to do that. The ability to look at someone's eyes, and again, if we're Zoom to Zoom, there is not going to be a mask on. The ability to read facial expressions and to have that person's focused attention is really meaningful. We know that the difference between asking face to face for a gift and asking for, which by the way is 80% of the time, we'll walk away with a pledge or a gift when we ask face to face. We don't have a lot of data yet on Zoom to Zoom, but if we can see someone's face, we get there 80% of the time, because we've done our homework beforehand. When we move to phone solicitation, that number goes down to, I'm letting you guess, is 20%. 20%. So when we move from face-to-face solicitation to phone solicitation, we go from 80% chance of success to 20% chance of success, because we simply can't see what they're doing on the other line. We cannot tell whether or not they are like sitting with their phone answering a text, or they put you on mute because their kid is asking them a question, or they're cooking dinner, or whatever they might be doing. We have no eye contact. We have no attention. So as much as possible, I'd like to push you to either get in a socially distanced, safe, face-to-face backyard solicitation, go wherever you need to go, or as the weather gets colder, utilize Zoom and look people in as much as you can, their camera in the eye, and have that conversation. It's more personal, it's more respectful of their time and energy, and you'll be able to get more of your questions answered about how they're feeling, because we can tell so much via facial expressions. So that I hope can be your goal. Let me summarize for you, and then I want to spend a few minutes at the end to allow you to ask questions if you have them. So data-driven decision-making, remember that I asked you to run that list, look for longtime donors, look for consecutive givers, look for people who have engaged in your events or programs or with the university or college in some way. Those people need to make it on the list. You've got to utilize data to drive your decision-making about who your major gift prospects are. 2, I find that if you schedule time each week on your calendar to make these stewardship moves, it's better than assuming that you'll get to it when you have time. In other words, no one's waiting for you to steward them. Nobody is waiting for you to cultivate them. And if you work on an advancement team where you're also doing some of the marketing work, where there's a deadline for that, right? We have to get that out at a certain time. That is very tangible, concrete work. And most of the time we move to the more concrete work on our desk. Like, well, I can just get this thing done. This I'd like to check off my list. So I will get that done. The cultivation, the stewardship work, no one's waiting for. There is no deadline for it unless you create that deadline. So for those of you who are supervising other people, I would suggest that you create deadlines for them around the stewardship work, that you take it as seriously as you do any other work, the solicitation work that's getting done by your team, and the communications work that's getting done. That there has to be a plan around it. And I find that if I schedule time each week on my calendar, like Friday mornings between 9 and 12, all I'm doing is making stewardship phone calls, or all I'm doing is scheduling Zoom meetings with my donors just to check in, just to say hello, just to take their temperature, to see how it's going, just to give them a sense of what's going on right now. We're going, we were hybrid and now we're going virtual. We're going virtual. We were whatever it is. I know life for you is week to week, month to month, but let's keep our donors engaged in what's going on. Let's give them updates. Let's talk to them about why the college or university has made that decision. The more information they have, the more engaged they are. So if I were you, I'd be scheduling time every single time on my calendar for that kind of work, and keep it sacred. Don't schedule right over it because no one's waiting for you to make that call. Pretend someone is waiting for you to make that call. That's how you're going to become a major gifts officer, is those kinds of conversations with donors. And set manageable goals for yourself, right? Or with your supervisor would be great. I was pushed as a development professional by my head of school to say, okay, how many times are you going to be meeting with people? And for you, it might be Zoom right now, but how many times per week, how many times per month can you commit to push yourself to stay on track? How many conversations can you get scheduled? And that way, that might be the motivating factor, is knowing that you want to have at least one a week, want to have at least twice a week, 3 times a week, whatever is reasonable and realistic for you. Set those goals and then spend time, save time on your calendar in order to set those meetings up. You're not always going to get people on the first try. Fourth is to utilize your board leadership or your committee leadership, your lay leadership, whoever lay leadership, volunteer leadership is available to partner with you, is asking. Oftentimes I find that schools have advancement committees that they have absolutely no idea what to do with. They're not assigned solicitors. They're not assigned solicitations, and they're not assigned cultivation or stewardship moves. So what is it they're there to do? They're there to partner with you. And oftentimes you may have people on that committee who say, I'll do anything but solicit. Well, I just spent the last 45 minutes talking to you about anything but soliciting. Those cultivation conversations, those stewardship conversations, forwarding emails or newsletters to people on that committee so that they can forward them with a personal note to the donors on their list. That's what stewardship is all about. Making it meaningful, making it personal. Oh, I saw something in this newsletter I thought would really interest you because I know you love our art program. I know you love our music program. We're doing a virtual concert that is coming up. The students have a virtual art exhibit. We know that you love art. You might want to tune into this. Whatever it is, that's keeping in touch with our donors. That's interesting them in the work that's going on right now and letting them know that you appreciate them and that you're tuned in to why they give. So that assignment of that relationship manager, that lay pro relationship, is so important. And the last thing I'll say about, and you could really utilize this for not just your board, this could be a committee role, but the board's role in capacity building. Again, replace the whatever lay body makes sense for you in this title. But this is how things go. And I think that what we want to keep in mind here is this does not all have to be true, except for the part about making their own commitment. Every board member, every committee member needs to be making a financial commitment, a financial contribution to the college or the university. That must be true. They cannot go out and ask other people for something that they haven't committed to themselves, even if it's a small but meaningful gift. What's meaningful for them is what's important. So that has to be true. But other than that, if you're thinking about the role for your board and capacity building, or you're thinking about the role of your advancement committee here, there might be some people really, really good on the strategy front and they're not at all comfortable soliciting. That's okay, because most of us are rewriting our development plans right now. Everything's in flux, right? We're pivoting everywhere. And so maybe this is someone who can work with you on strategy and rewrite the calendar for the rest of the year. Maybe this is someone who's really good at finding alumni out in the community, but again, they're not so comfortable asking. Great. Help identify donors for the campaign. Have them look through those A, B, and C lists with you. We need people to do that. Maybe they'll make the introduction. That warm handoff is so important. We don't need everybody soliciting, but we do need those introductions. We do need that, like, this is someone in my network who actually went to the school who I think would be fabulous for you to get to know. Maybe you can do a 3-way Zoom. Those warm handoffs are oftentimes more important than the actual solicitation. So I would be giving your board or your advancement committee this whole list, these choices to say, here are all the different ways that you can engage with our team, the professional advancement team, in fundraising. They all matter. They're all equally important. And we'll take you wherever we can get you. This is an or, not an and. You can do any of these things and say that this is part of fundraising. You also must make your gift. But just even thanking people, if the board or the advancement committee wanted to stop their meeting 10 minutes early and pull out their cell phones, and you as the advancement professional provided them with names to call and make thank you phone calls for the $500 and over gifts, or whatever threshold makes sense to you, that is a wonderful use of your board or your committee to engage them in stewardship, to make those thank you phone calls. And it's so easy, even if you're leaving a message, to say, my name is Amy Schiffman. I'm on the advancement committee of such and such school. I understand you made a very generous gift this past month, and I just wanted to call and say thank you. It's really meaningful for us. It's really meaningful for the students. Our financial assistance would not be where it is today without you. Thank you. That's a powerful phone call. We don't get a lot of those in our world. And so your board being out there, or your development or your advancement committee making those kinds of phone calls, is very, very meaningful. So give your lay partners the opportunity to help you in that renewal process, in deepening those relationships. I'm going to leave a few minutes now at the end. I wanted to tell you two things. And one is, if you go on my website, evolvegivinggroup.com, we have a COVID page. So if you're looking for more resources about donor communications during COVID, or sample communications plans, blogs that have to do with fundraising during COVID, we have a ton of that on that page if you go to evolvegivinggroup.com. And if you want to engage, and we're doing 30-minute complimentary coaching for anyone who's involved in the ACI conference. So if there's something that I've talked about today on the fundraising front, on the strategic planning front, on working with a board or committee member, and that you just need to say, well, what you said isn't exactly what my issue is, I need a little bit of time, someone from my team, it might be me, is happy to spend 30-ish minutes. Lots of times the calls go over 30 minutes, and that's okay. I'm just talking about your particular issue. And if that's something you're interested in, email us at evolvegivinggroup.com, or email me at amy@evolvegg.com. And I'm happy to answer those questions. I'm going to stop share and see if we have any questions.
Looks like there's one from Monica.
What does Monica say?
She's saying, our trustee leadership want to help in the fundraising process, but are hesitant to contact their friends and fellow alumni to make the warm handoff. What tools can we use to help them?
Yeah, I think that when I talked about that paring down of the case for support to like really easily digestible chunks of information, like I always say to my clients, no more than 3 or 4 bullet points. Why is it that we're raising money right now? It's not a capital campaign, right? So that's not about bricks and mortar. Maybe yours is, but what we're generally talking about is supporting annual campaign or operations. So what is that all about right now? What has changed? What are these pressing needs? People need to understand, especially if you're looking at millennial giving. By the way, there's so much written about millennial giving, but what we know about millennial donors is they like to follow their dollar. They really want to understand where the dollars go. Unlike their parents' and grandparents' generation, who are interested in sort of like federated giving or United Way style giving, where like, I'll give to this one institution who will distribute it everywhere. Not so much for millennials. They want to understand where the dollars are going. They like to look you up in Charity Navigator. So I would want to be able to make those talking points, those little snippets, as digestible and specific as possible. How many students are being assisted with financial aid right now? How does that compare to last year? Are your numbers up because of COVID? What is it that you're trying to achieve? How much money do you need to raise, and why? Where will those dollars go? How much do you need now for technology? How much do you need in order to continue making the college or university a safe place? What's going into that kind of work? That's what I would want to give to your your board of governors or your trustees, to have them, give them those talking points. And again, just a conversation. They get nervous about soliciting. So yes, we're talking about the warm handoff is, can they get you a conversation is step one. Don't worry about the gift yet.
There's another question that came in from an anonymous attendee. It says, what number of major gift donors should we have on our list for our officers right now?
For your donor officers. Okay. I mean, listen, whatever I say, you're going to laugh, because it will either sound like way too many or way too few. So, I mean, I have worked with, some donor officers that have 300 names on their list. And I've worked with donor officers that have 30 names on their list. And the 30 names, when you get down to that few, it's because they're very high value prospects. Right? It takes a long time to achieve a gift. If you're talking about, high 6 and 7 figure giving, well, then you might have very few prospects. At the lower levels, they tend to keep giving you more and more and more and more. So I don't think there is a number, but what I want to understand is what is manageable for you. If you have so many that you cannot touch half the people on your list, let's say you have 300, and that's a joke because 150 of them are not really getting, I will tell you this. When I was the major gifts director at an independent high school in the city, and this is obviously different than higher ed, I had 150 major donors on my list. And by the end of 3 years, I knew a little bit about every single one of them. By my third year, I was there for 5 years. So it took me a couple of years to understand them, or at least know a little bit about them. I sort of mastered that list. It took me 3 years to get to 150. If you told me I had to double that list, that would have been challenging for me to like really know something about them. And I was sort of not only a solicitor for some of them, but I was the coordinator or the conductor of the orchestra, where I was asking my head of school to approach certain people and my board chair to approach certain people and my advancement committee chair to approach certain people. So I had 2 major gifts chairs and I had 8 people on my major gifts committee. So I had 10 lay solicitors for 150 donors, and we split up the list. And I was in charge of deploying each of these people. You may have a lot more than that. I find that a lot more than that becomes hard to really manage and do a good job with, because I'm telling you to go deep, not wide. Maybe you have no choice, but maybe you need to say to whoever is supervising you, here's the segment of my list. You might have given me 300 people on my list, but here's the segment of my list that I'm really going to go deep with. The rest of these people are going to feel a little bit more transactional. They're going to get group emails from me or whatever. Nowadays you can send Dear Amy when it was just, actually a group email. But here's a segment of the list that's going to get really personalized communications from me. I don't think we can do a good job with a lot more than that. You can tell me in the chat if you disagree with me.
All right. There is another question that came into my email.
Okay.
It's saying, what percentage of administration costs is acceptable in impact reports?
That's another tricky question, because it depends on the size of your budget. So for smaller nonprofits, we see a bigger percentage of the budget allocated to admin costs. So we're talking about, for a smaller nonprofit, there, it could be that around up to a third of that budget is acceptable, the expense budget, in terms of administration. When we talk about, what percentage of the dollar goes directly to the students, goes directly to the program, the larger the nonprofit, the expectation is that percentage will shrink. So for a larger nonprofit, and I don't know what school you're with, I would say less than 25%. We want going back to, sort of non-direct program. You'll find a lot of disagreement about that in the literature. I don't think schools who have higher administrative overhead are actually necessarily doing a worse job stewarding their donors' funds. I think the smaller you are, the more you have to spend to make things work. And the bigger you are, we tend to be able, you see United Way with these like tiny overhead margins. They have bigger teams and they raise more money. So it's a tough question. I would say somewhere between a quarter and a third goes to overhead.
I don't see any more questions right now, and it looks like we're almost out of
We're
time.
almost at time. Yeah. So if people have other questions, please feel free um, email me and then I think Constance, you're going to make the PowerPoint available as well if people want the slides.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks so much, Amy. You're always a pleasure to have. And
Thank
most of the
you.
people will probably be joining us again at 2 o'clock. So until then, everybody stay safe.
Okay. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.